Welcome back, everyone. It's the Practice Forward podcast with your host, Owen Bush from Scandaplan. And today I'm joined with my new friend, Eugene Colberg. Hi, Eugene. How you doing?
How's it going? Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Eugene's got a really interesting practice based in Brooklyn and doing a really wide range of things. And we'll get into that. We're hosted by Scandaplan. Scandaplan is the measure of excellence for architects and engineers. We can scan and model any building in weeks. And we have a wide variety of standard and disciplines to tailor to your needs. And we're ready with you when you are with LiDAR to BIM workflow for any kind of existing conditions. You have a very wide-ranging portfolio. It spans housing, hospitality, retail, and wellness. So how would you describe how Colberg architecture kind of shapes all these different things in your definition of architectural relevance?
Well, I mean, I think that from the perspective of the scope of work that we do, I had an old mentor when I first started working in New York that said that they would like to do from the spoon to the city, right? And I think that we maintain our relevance by trying to inform at that sort of range of scale. I throughout my years in practice, I worked in offices where the work that they've done or the work that they do, some of the offices is very, very specific and very specialized, and it's described, or they used to describe it as a constellation of experts. We like to emphasize on the generalist aspect of the practice and how different project types, different scales, different types of clients, different different sites can just inform each other. And also doing the same thing every single day of the week is probably a little boring, so there's exciting things about a certain type of project versus another. I think there's also the rhythm or the cadence of doing a small project, right, which can be done in a handful of months, versus a large project, which is a sort of several-year engagement. Gives yourself, one is a long kind of shallow wave, and the other one is more intense. The smaller projects give you opportunities to kind of try different things.
Yeah, of course.
Where it's not that it's not important, because they're all important, but they're not as any mistake or any error or any little thing might not be as consequential as to trying it on a big project.
Yeah. So, wow, just so many amazing projects here. So you've done a lot of adaptive reuse projects. State Street to the Simon. These are all quite a few. Huh?
I mean, in New York, most of what an architectural practice is working on existing buildings, right? I mean, there's a sort of robust 19th century fabric, and most of the projects, most commercial projects, right, whether they're offices or retail spaces or hospitality, I mean, you're basically dealing in that space, right? And then residential, if you are working within a landmark district or in sort of buildings that have great bones, you're definitely doing that. So most of the majority of anybody working in New York or any big city for that matter, right, are going to be adaptive reuse projects. And then shifting with population shift in different neighborhoods or different attention, right? They go from not only just a straight up renovation, but also a change in program, right? Like one thing that used to be, warehouse, right? It's now apartments, right? Or something that used to be maybe, the 4-story walk-up apartments. Now it's a single-family townhouse, right? So that entire shift that kind of comes and goes depending on the neighborhood you are in the city, that leads itself to that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at these State Street townhouses you did, and I mean, it's a really incredible.
So those are new. Those are ground up. Excuse me. Those are ground up. They happen to be next to a cluster of townhouses that are on the National Historic Register.
Sure. Well, I mean, the way they blend in is really
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point, right? I mean, in when you're doing that type of project, you want to be contextual, but contextual in an interesting way, right? Not necessarily just mimicking what's there.
Oh, it just blows me away in Brooklyn. I mean, I moved out of Brooklyn in 2003, so when I go back there now, I used to live in Williamsburg, and so I go there now, and it's like it's 50% the old neighborhood and 50% these crazy buildings like what you work on.
Yeah.
And
well, and the interesting part there, right, is that there's a big stock of, probably closer to the water, closer to Kent, but there's a big stock of like these big warehouse buildings, right? That now with the sort of the it's an interesting shift in program, because most people, or there's a high density residential population there, and it's a leisure program, right? So so we can talk about the bathhouse, we can talk about, there's gyms and all sorts of programs like that, even kind of lounges and nightclubs that kind of take over that type of space.
Yeah. So a lot of the work you're doing is, as we mentioned, adaptive reuse, and you're doing a lot of like incredible sustainability work. And so, I just feel like could you just briefly talk to me about sustainability and like why that's important to you and to other architects? Because I feel like it's a word that everybody's always talking about, and obviously a lot of laws and regulations around it. But I think that there's, a good reason for all this, that like most people who are not deeply in the architecture world don't really understand.
Well, one of the things that gets missed in the kind of the overall sustainability conversation is building operations, but also building construction, right? There's obviously, electric cars and solar power and hydropower and stuff, but there's a lot of carbon that gets used in a lot of the building materials, right? There's a lot of energy that it takes to do metal studs, right, or to do metal panels on facades. So when it comes to sustainability, the construction industry is a big contributor, let's say, or it can be a big contributor to that effort, both in the way that the buildings are operated, and by operated I mean like how efficient they are, right? Like how much water you use, how much HVAC you use, how well insulated you are, how much the reflectivity your roof has, but also in the way and the materials that you use to do that. And then as architects, we sort of see ourselves as the stewards for that. So to the degree that we can affect, because that building's going to be there. I mean, whatever building we're doing, right? We're doing over here a couple blocks away a 300-unit apartment building. That building's going to be there for a long, long time, right? So to the degree that the operations of that can be as efficient as they can, not only for for the bottom line of the operator, right, but also for uh, just for the sustainability purpose of it. And now in New York and in other cities, we've seen legislation about limiting natural gas appliances and all of that. So a lot of the buildings are super efficient. New York City just passed some zoning changes called the City of Yes. It came in three parts. One of them was directly focused on sustainability. And before they would give you, meaning the city would give you, let's just say, zoning bonuses or zoning credits for how efficient your envelope was. Now they just give you an overall kind of percentage, right? If you're a super efficient building, right? Which then, I mean, that starts to target the envelope, the the cooling system, the heating system, the water usage. And again, as stewards, right, of construction, of what we're designing and what we're doing, it's our responsibility and our calling to kind of be responsible about it. It's something that is a premium on kind of regular construction, right, or regular construction strategies. And I think it's also, it falls on us. There's obviously sustainability consultants that we work with and so on, but it's also on us to kind of educate not only our clients but the public in general, and what the benefit that has.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like I'm an entrepreneur. I work in tech. I've done a bunch of things, and I got into this thing working with architects. I'm like, I really enjoy working with architects and engineers. They're like really fantastic,
smart people, right?
Super smart people, really organized, great communicators, all strictly business. Usually behind the scenes people, small egos. Egos are in check at least. And they're collaborators. I started out working in the film and TV industry, deeply collaborative thing. And architecture is another thing like that, where there's so much coordination. There's these huge budgets. There's all these scheduling, and it's very similar in a lot of ways.
I mean, I think that the thing, sorry to interrupt, but the thing that we unfortunately don't have control over is when, by the time the project gets to us, at least from a couple of angles, right? But from the sustainability perspective, by the time the project gets to us, somebody has already made a decision about it, right? Whether they want to be, whether they want to pursue, whether it's a LEED certification or they want to align themselves with a well standard, or whatever it is, right? We always do a sort of gut check in the beginning of a project to try, if the project does not have sustainability goals, to say, look, it just takes just a little bit, or you can just do it in this portion, or you can do it in that portion, because every little bit helps, right? I think the thing that a lot of bigger clients are realizing is that the more they build it into their to their sort of central core, the more it gets broadcasted to the different things that they're doing, right? So by the time it gets to us, there is not necessarily a sustainability strategy, but a sustainability goal. And that's when it's really powerful. Because for me, or for any architect to try and convince a client to do something that is going to be a premium of 30-40%, right? That takes a lot of effort. But if it's downstream, and by the time it gets to us, there's a goal that we can actually work together in achieving. That's when it's, from the sustainability perspective, that's when it's really great.
Right. Yeah. And I was going to say, it wasn't really until I started working with architects and being in this industry that it wasn't until about 5 years after I was developing ScandaPlan and had scanned thousands of buildings that I really kind of educated myself and learned that, architecture and construction, it's you could say 30 to 40% of the waste and greenhouse emissions.
Exactly. Right. And right. And it's right. So, and then the big buckets are energy, right? Like, how much energy does your building take? The second bucket is how much energy do the materials that you're using take to manufacture? And also, if you're, how much recycling can you do if you're taking out, something that's there, right? Are you able to recycle the bricks? Are you able to smelt the metal? Like what is it that you can do? And there's different strategy. Like if you follow the LEED standards, there's different guidelines of different strategies and different points that you can get for different things. But yeah, it's sort of all hands on deck in terms of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, I feel like that's a responsibility that a lot of architects kind of take for granted because they're aware of that. But
Yeah.
other people in our culture really aren't really that aware of like how connected construction and architecture are to the environment.
Yeah.
Uh,
100%.
and why it motivates so many architects and engineers.
Yeah, I mean, and we always want to do the right thing, right? And I think at the end of the day, everybody does, right? At some point, budget or schedule or something gets in the way. But at least in the beginning, everybody wants to do the right thing.
Yeah. Let's use that as a segue into talking about. There's so many things I want to talk to you about around this project. So Eugene has recently completed 2 different bathhouses, which are kind of a new, I would say, kind of a new kind of architectural typology for the city, at least in terms of 21st century city, and sort of bringing back ancient traditional forms of architectural space back into Brooklyn. So Eugene, tell me about there's 2, right? There's one in Williamsburg and
yeah. So we have our client is called the Bathhouse or Bathhouse. We did the first one in Williamsburg on North 10th and Berry. I think it opened in 2000. Let's say it was like 2019, maybe. And
it's a block away from my old studio. I used to be on North 11th in Berry and White. Yeah.
And then that did very well. And then they decided to expand into Manhattan with a facility that's probably about 3 times the size of the one in Williamsburg. And then after we were done with the one in Manhattan, the opportunity came up to take more space in the building where the Williamsburg one is, and we just expanded that twice the size plus a rooftop that just opened this past weekend.
Wow.
But it's an interesting typology because similar to what you just said, it sort of always has been there, right? Obviously, we recognize bathhouses and stuff from ancient Rome and in antiquity, but in Manhattan, there's always been the Turkish baths and on the East Village. What we're doing and what seems to be popular nowadays, not only with our clients but other people that are doing it, it's just that it seems it's a different angle on recovery in kind of wellness with a capital W. It's similar, or it's a space that works alongside a gym, and it's popular and it works, right? So the trick is, how do we make it architecture? How do we make it relevant, right? How do we make it a space that you want to hang out in for a handful of hours? How do we make it into a space that is welcoming to everybody, right? It doesn't matter what gender, body type, fill in the blank, right? It needs to be welcoming. You are going to have a restorative experience in there. And we don't necessarily have because it's within the city fabric, right? Back to the comment of working in New York, we're most likely working on or within an existing structure, right? You don't necessarily have like the scale of the Bath of Caracalla in Rome, where you have the big domes and the big vaults and stuff, right? So how do you architecturally, both through the use of materials and scale and the kind of the journey through the bathhouse, make it into a space that's that's memorable, that's impactful, that's iconic, but that it's also comfortable, right? Some people are going to visit this place very often. I think they offer, at least our client offers a monthly pass, right, where you can just, similar to belonging to a gym, right? You can go every day if you want, or some people go for special events, celebrate their birthdays or whatever it is, right? So you have to be both welcoming and have a sense of comfort for somebody who's going to be going there every day of the week, presumably, or somebody's going to be there once a year. I would like to go more. Unfortunately, I'm always working, so I can't escape.
Yeah, sure.
But
I mean, I'm sure it's, it's great. I mean, well, to me, I think it's cool because there's, you've got millennials and Gen Z who don't really have any kind of model for a bathhouse because they all sort of got creepy around the AIDS time. And then
I mean, and I don't think, right, and I don't think anybody does, right? Because there is, you put in all this work to exercise and train, and if you belong to a sports team, I mean, I play softball in a couple of leagues over the summer, or if you do, or if you play basketball, whatever it is, right? There is some sense of recovery, right? Whether it's getting a massage, whether it's doing some contrast therapy, and it's stuff that that really works, and it's really helpful for your well-being, right?
I mean, it's great. It's like it's kind of like a mythic subterranean voyage that's completely restorative, and you come back out and you're ready to have a new chapter in your life. I love it. I mean, what do you think in terms of like sequencing that kind of like narrative experience? Like, what do you think about when you're thinking about the whole journey, the whole subterranean journey that people are making?
Well, similar to other typologies, it's a very, very, very regulated project type and experience, right? Not only do you need to comply with Department of Building regulations, but you need to comply with Department of Health regulations, right? You want to make sure that everybody is safe, that the water that you're getting into is safe, that at the end of the day there's pools, right? Somebody can drown, so there's enough space and there's enough kind of floor area for emergency situations if they develop, to take care of those. So the sequence through the space is a highly regulated journey. That being said, there are ways that we can emphasize or de-emphasize different aspects of that journey. And our client bathhouse, the first one, they came up with the idea of the hero's journey on how you have to sort of go to the underworld and then come back out at the end as a different person, right? And that's a great analogy for the bathhouse, right? You're going in there, holding on to whatever it is you're holding on, whether it's stress or tired or whatever it is. You go through this process, and then you come out, a better person. It just so happens that the spaces that are available / convenient / good for this type of program are on the ground, right? In the case of the location in Manhattan, it was a parking garage, and that one had both the good structure, good ceiling heights, so as long as you can make the circulation work. In the case of Manhattan, it was 3 stories. As long as you can make the circulation work in a successful way, there's shouldn't be an issue.
It's an incredible form of adaptive reuse.
100%.
I thoroughly encourage more garage to bathhouse conversions.
Yeah, the same here. I mean,
we should have one in every neighborhood. It's really, I wish there was one here,
Well, but it's an interesting, I mean, it leads to an interesting issue that the recent rezoning for the city of Yes tried to tackle, which is in New York, you have, every time you build a new building, especially a residential one, you have a parking requirement, right? And that usually takes the shape of a garage, because you're not going to, you don't have the empty lot area to do surface parking. And if it's a garage, it's usually underground, right?
Yeah.
However, the regulation's a little outdated because you don't have that many cars to park.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
those spaces end up being underused. If it goes to a garage operator, which is the case on our project, they don't have enough to keep going. So it turns into a bathhouse, or it turns into a gym, or some other program that can take advantage of the bones of that space.
And we haven't even discussed yet what I think makes this bathhouse concept even more striking and timely is that okay, let's say you're taking over garages and repurposing them for the city of the future, right? I mean, one thing that we may have less of is cars, but what a lot of people now need to park is their giant data centers, right? So
Right.
so in this case, in the case of the Flatiron, is that right? The Flatiron bathhouse?
Yeah.
The Flatiron bathhouse is partially heated by a giant Bitcoin mine. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there is also a Bitcoin mine there, which, if anyone's ever been in one of these data centers, they generate enormous amounts of heat.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting take on going back to the sustainability conversation from a little while ago. It's an interesting take on it. I would like to take credit for it. We had nothing to do with it. This was all the client and kind of their vision and their
Sure.
sort of tenacity for stuff like that. And to your point, right? Like we have to use the power anyways.
Yeah.
Right. Whether to chill the pools, to to heat the saunas or the different thermal rooms, heat the pools. So at the end of the day, if you can use any off sort of any remnants
I think
of
we should
something
create
else, right?
yeah. I think we should
and you
create a
see
regulation right now that every giant Bitcoin mine needs its own bathhouse.
well, and you see it. I mean, you kind of see it within the mechanical systems, right? Like you have ERV machines and stuff like that, which take some of the heat generated by something else to do a second function. But yeah, in this case, I think there's a good article on it. It used to be on the Forbes website, which kind of goes through the entire thing. But yeah, it was a very, very interesting take on sustainability, and I would say a modern take on sustainability.
Well,
right?
I'd say it's also
using something on using not necessarily depending on something that's happening far away, like a wind farm or something, but this is something local, right?
well, it's also, I think, something that you have to be brought by your client because it's so I guess it's like the opposite of the purity testing that most sustainability would have, because it's obviously mining Bitcoin is like probably the most wasteful thing humanity has ever invented.
Right. Exactly. And this same with the AI, with the machines required to generate all the AI answers.
Yeah.
And you're kind of getting it too far on that with the reusing the energy.
Yeah. So seems like there's even in this case there's some historic preservation aspects in both of these bathhouses, as with most of your projects. And so how do you balance historic preservation with creating modern fresh spaces?
Well, some of it is required, right? If a project is within a landmark district in New York, there's the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and they have their own set of rules. They mostly apply to exterior work. There's a handful of interior landmarks within the 5 boroughs, but it's mostly exterior. And we do some of that. We do projects, both commercial and residential, that are, have sensitivities around that, and we need to work through within the framework of the rules and come up with a strategy for it. On the interior side, if there are things that we uncover that are interesting for whatever reason, whether it's a material or an assembly, or if it's, say we're changing the program of a building and there's like some super cool thing that you want to use to highlight maybe some of the heritage of the building, that usually is sort of a low-hanging fruit on that. And so those are typically the kind of the main things we look at in the beginning. The kind of the hard part is when you're trying to take an old shell and kind of transform it to something that needs to meet the different modern codes, right? Whether that's from an energy perspective or cooling and heating or energy conservation or even egress, right? Like stair width, doors, that kind of stuff. So we look at the interesting stuff first. We sort of layer it in with the stuff that we have to do, whether by landmarks, regulations, or by code. And then we always kind of try and find a happy medium. It also depends on what our clients would like to see, right? Some of them are interested in a more historical appearance. Other clients are like, nope, we don't want to do any of that. And so it depends on what is it that you find interesting, what is interesting, that something that you want to get out of it as an architect, and try and reconcile what the different things are, whether they're code related or kind of client driven.
Yeah. Well, I see, like, I would say, like, for those who can't really be looking at Eugene's work right now, I mean, I would say, like, maybe what you're probably best known for is these multifamily developments in the city, which, reinterpretations of standard footprint, tenement buildings and row houses and things like this that are just they go side by side with these older classic buildings in the Brooklyn landscape, and they're just like morphing into the future, but they're very respectful of.
And I think you just want to, I think as architects, we try to be, I mean, obviously, I love the city that I live and work in.
Yeah.
Right? And the last thing I want to do is screw it up.
Sure.
And that takes a lot of responsibility, right? I think.
Yeah, of course.
When clients are talking to us, but especially about a new building, or especially about rehabbing a full building, it's a responsibility that we don't take lightly, right? It's like,
no, like in some cases, you're doing a whole block, a whole half a block of buildings, and these are like neighborhoods people grew up in, and
right, exactly, and people, right, and the last thing you want to do is screw it up, right? So we always take a lot of care, always checking in. What is that? What is the thing that we're doing? How does it affect the street life? How does it, can we create some civic space out of it? Whether it's like this little or a little bigger, how does it affect the skyline? Like what are the different views when you're working with a new volume, right? And then when you're working with an older building, whether it's an official landmark or not, you try and be a steward for that, right?
Yeah.
That building has been there for a long time. Hopefully it'll remain there for a longer time.
Hmm.
And we're just a steward of it, right? So again, you kind of don't really want to screw it up.
Hmm.
So again, it's a big responsibility that people put on us, and it's something we don't really take lightly. But
Yeah, yeah,
it's always about checking, like, okay, how does the building work internally, and what is it doing to its surroundings?
sure. Oh no, this is all the kind of stuff when I go to the city and I see it and I feel good about it, frankly. Like, but I also see, like, as I was saying, I lived in Williamsburg, so there's probably no other neighborhood in the city that's morphed as much as that in the past 20
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
And
sure.
just to see it gradually like morphing, and then it's like new typologies are replacing old ones so quickly, and then actually just seeing kind of now you're starting to see second and third generation newer buildings in that neighborhood, and it's language is really changing fast, but
Yeah.
it's great to see.
Well, and it's
um
always, I mean, you always have to balance from, again, from sort of making a new building, right? You always have to balance like how iconic you want to be
mhm.
as a presence, right? And but also how respectful you want to be to the fabric, right? The
Right.
first things when we do a new building, it's like, oh, do you want to be a fabric building, or do you want to be an icon, right? And sometimes especially in Williamsburg, there's streets that have like, 5 different buildings in a row, and they all think that they're icons, and at some point there's just no city fabric left,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, right. And in
Um,
between, there's some little place with vinyl siding, and
right. So
yeah,
you always want to understand what position or what kind of sense is your building take in the context.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm looking at Third and Bond, which is an older project of yours, but
Yeah,
I see that it's it was the first to be certified LEED Platinum in New York.
right.
So what is can you explain to our listeners like what that means? What is LEED Platinum?
So LEED is let's just say a certification platform run by
Hmm.
the USGBC,
Hmm.
which they standardize for different project types. They standardize different benchmarks that um, your your building can comply with, and you get a certain certification, almost like bragging rights.
Hmm.
You get LEED certification. I think there's bronze, silver, and then platinum.
Yeah.
And this came about maybe, and it might be getting my dates a little off, but maybe about 20 years ago.
Hmm.
And it sort of gained real popularity around 2000 and probably like 2007, 2010, something like that. Um, and it's something that people can, well, clients can use it for
LEED
marketing.
Platinum kind of like it's like a passive home, or I mean, what defines it as being that LEED
Well,
Platinum?
platinum is the degree of kind of strategies you've used, right? So platinum is,
Okay.
is the top, or it used to be the
Uh-huh.
top back then. So the more sustainable you are, the more. So we in that project, we were the most sustainable we could be based on that scoring process.
Yeah.
And it's always, especially when you do development work. Um, it's a balance of what are the true sustainability goals of that client. In this case, it would be a developer.
Hmm.
um, what are the actual requirements you need to meet,
Yeah.
right? And what makes sense from a budget perspective, right? and,
Sure.
and if it's somebody that wants to do good, which this developer is great at doing, right, they're super interested in that.
Yeah.
And you can also use it as a marketing tool and whatnot. But in this case, that project was it was the first LEED. The category was LEED for homes,
Yeah.
uh, platinum. And this was back in 2007, 2009. Passive house didn't really exist, and it was just, it's a strategy on like, okay, what do we need to do to lower energy consumption? What do we need to do to insulate better the building? Where your materials are coming from. Are they coming from somewhere close? Are they coming from China? What's the recycled content of different things? What type of artificial adhesives you're not using. So it's a whole mix of things. And but in that case, I think they turned around and used it as a strong marketing tool.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, that's a 16-year-old project. What do you think is? Let's just talk a little bit about your technical process and what kind of tools you're using. And so, I mean, how would you approach that process differently? Do you think? Let's say you were doing third and bond right now in 2025.
Well, I think that so our main I wouldn't call it a design tool, but the main tool we use every day, it's a software called Revit. It's also it's a popular BIM software, and BIM is building information modeling, right? For those who are not
it's like
familiar with it. And everything is now more integrated, right? So we work in this model. We work together with the structural engineer. We work together with the MEP engineer.
You were not working in Revit at that point in 2009, I guess not, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So, okay.
No. That was CAD straight through. Sure. I mean, BIM had sort of cracked the surface a little bit, and it wasn't until the GSA started requiring BIM software in their projects that it sort of really gained momentum. But yeah. So anyway, so that is a very, very powerful and robust tool that has a lot of data and a lot of information, and you can use it as a starting point to generate different analysis of different things, right? Like, it's very easy to take it into energy software and do some energy modeling. It's very easily taken into what am I thinking? Just like prototyping and fabrication, right?
Sure.
And that Shop Architects made really popular with the Barclays Arena over here in Brooklyn, and there were a couple of other projects that they did, right? Like you're basically just you're basically giving somebody a model that they can not necessarily fabricate from, but really close to it, right?
Sure.
And so we use that as a basis for it. We can do shadow studies, whatever it is, right? But it also gives people the ability to quantify a lot of things. Like, it's very, very quickly you can understand like what's the area of sheetrock that you're using, or your area of metal stuff, whatever it is. So whatever number, whatever field you want to quantify, you can, right? And it's called parametric modeling, right? And that's the sort of the magic of it. So with that, so we have that on one end, right? And then on the other end, all of the different building codes and the different energy conservation codes have become a lot more sophisticated. Back then, in 2007, we were still using, for example, the 1968 building code in New York. We've gone through, and I think it might have been, I forget, but it might have been like the first energy conservation code. There's been like six editions of the energy conservation code, and so the more sophisticated the different things are, the more consultants you need, and the more sort of somebody focus on something.
That's why having that central source of truth in the model is so important. Right?
Exactly.
So
and
coordination with all these different vendors and things, right?
And when you're working on an existing building, right, something kicking it back to you, the service that you provide with just the basis of that model, that is invaluable to us.
Yeah, well, we're like a foundational service. So, I mean, we're basically the first ones on site.
Right.
And then we provide. So to me, I like to think about BIM in terms of dimensions. So it's kind of like we provide, like back when you were doing third and bond, you were probably still in some ways, most people were still just in 2 dimensions thinking about it. I mean, obviously,
Yeah, no,
it's always 3-dimensional, right? But
100%, and 100%. And one of the things we did for that project, which was one, I don't think it, I forget if it played a role in the sustainability effort, but something that was not revolutionary, but something that was something that nobody had done for that scale of a job, was that our superstructure was panelized, was modular, right? So
okay,
I remember having to draw these rudimentary drawings in AutoCAD, and then the fabricator for these panels, which included the panel and structure and studs and whatnot, gave us all of these shop drawings that we obviously had to review and approve, and they were going to be final, right? So they included window openings and door openings. So the window openings need to be coursed with the brick that we were going to have. So there were a lot of decisions that we sort of had to do, and kind of do calculations on the back of a piece of paper. I mean, it wasn't like that, but it was in CAD, that
yeah,
now we would just natively do on a model, and we
it's
sort of don't
exported
have
right
to
out
think
of the
about it.
model.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we were doing something in an analog way that would have been picture perfect for Revit.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think about it in terms of dimensions, right? So essentially what ScandiPlan offers is the foundation of the existing building, the existing conditions of the building, rendered in 3 dimensions, right? At a high level of detail. That becomes the central source of truth, along with the point cloud itself, which has got the millimeter accuracy.
Yeah.
So then that's really the risk mitigation of the entire project. That's the true central source of truth, is the point cloud. But then from there, it's like we deliver this 3D asset, which is, the best, portrayal we can do of the 3 dimensions of the building.
No, and I remember the
geometry. It's all about geometry, right? So we deliver the geometry, but then going into 4D, what Eugene and what you guys are doing is taking it to the medium of time, the medium of efficiency, planning, budgeting, and then all kinds of. These are like the 7th, 8th, and 9th dimension that I don't even understand, which is so much of this sustainability. And I'm sure there's like really high tech kind of simulated sustainability now for creating digital twins of buildings. And see, to me, that's what really is interesting to me, that someday the foundation that we deliver becomes this digital twin for this kind of like living building where.
Well, right, and people use it for. I mean, the one of the powerful things about BIM, which I personally have yet to see, because we don't necessarily get involved in that aspect of the building, but it's in building operations, right? You can understand everything that there is to know about, especially if it's an as-built condition, right? It's incredible the kind of the information that it has. I mean, we see a little bit on the name escapes me right now, but the BIS, the mechanical operations of the building, right? In that in its own way, it's in that BIS is like building information system, maybe it stands for. It's what controls the cooling tower and the heating and the this and that and the thermostats, and it's at a central location. In some of the ways that building operators use some of the R-based model with input from other people as they run the buildings for that. So to your point, it's the first step.
Yeah, I mean, I just like to envision a world where an old historic building can also be LEED platinum, and can also be just as smart as one of these new builds that you're doing, where through good adaptive reuse. I love the idea of having these historic buildings have their own digital twins that are helping them with their sustainability and efficiency.
Right.
You know?
No, and also if you're as a building owner, right? For example, if you're trying to game different strategies on, like say for example, you own a building, right? It's 5 stories. You need to change a bunch of windows. You could, if you had a model like yours, or if there was some digital twin, right, of that, and you needed to change the windows, you can very quickly generate different variants of like, okay, well, these windows cost X. They're going to save us this amount of money on operations, right? Like it's a kind of like a nice kind of, you can game the different choices that you have.
Yeah. What do you think about how AI is going to affect your work and just architecture in general in the next 5 years?
You know what? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Short answer, but we can see it starting to influence, not influence, but having, I mean, from our perspective, I think we want from using AI technology, I think it's going to give us the capacity to come up with better answers to stuff. Not necessarily better because it's an AI who's coming with an answer, but for example, you can do 2,500 facade studies of one facade as opposed to 5, right? Not that more is better, but at least you can just say, look, I've tried every single version of this, and and you can
see, iterating, yeah.
You can see, you can see a pattern, right?
It's really
right.
great, yeah.
I mean, I think there's also so that's from a sort of a design end, and we can, and a handful of years ago, a software called Grasshopper came in, and it's you could iterate a lot faster and a lot easier. I think sort of AI gives us the capacity to do that during design. I think it also, we use it. We don't use it enough. We've been trying to figure out how we can integrate it into our workflow in different things. But it's sometimes it's you'll ask ChatGPT something, and it can, at least it gives you a good place to start as an answer. But then you can go ahead and confirm on your own. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, if it's something code related or safety related, you always want to physically confirm it with something, but at least it gives you a little bit of direction.
Oh,
right?
For me, it's been really fantastic to understand. Actually, what I've been researching is just kind of like all the local laws in New York, because for us, like most of our business actually comes out of these necessities of these laws rather than people actually doing any kind of visionary remodeling of these buildings or anything.
Right.
It's a lot of it is just sort of compliance with. So for example, I use a AI to learn about that, and that's been fantastic for me. Being kind of an outsider to the industry.
Yeah, no, and I'll use it to research something like that, and then it gives me a place to go and a place to look and a place to confirm myself.
Yeah.
But also things like, I mean, ideally, what I would like to see, and I get targeted ads 7 days a week on kind of this stuff, but I would like to see a lot of the things that we get sort of early on in projects. It's like, oh, like we're trying to fund, we're trying to come up with this project. We're trying to fundraise. I need some renderings, right? I need to show something to people. And, and the typical answer that we give is like, well, that's not that easy. Like we kind of need to go through a concept design phase where we identify different, just what the project is. And then we go in and design the vignettes that they would need, for the fundraising. But it would be great if we could use a tool like that to kind of shortcut some of that. It's like, oh, okay, like you're really interested in these vignettes, this is what. But that day will come, and it's also, I love if it could take care of our accounting. It's just kind of boring stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, right.
You know,
All the
or
annoying
like,
stuff.
yeah,
No,
or
I
like
know.
follow up on invoices, or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah, yeah.
that
No,
related
I
to
mean,
that. But
well, the thing is like I've seen. I mean, you're very like you're incredibly young for having accomplished as much as you have in your career. I would say for an architect, it seems. So you've been doing like really major projects for many years now. You don't seem like you're very old. But I would say, for a lot of times, people are like, in these larger firms, it's like before they become senior architects or whatever, they've really put in many years. And I see that like AI could really just be kind of like an easy button for them, where, you know what I mean? I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I
It's,
think, well, yeah, I think it's just identifying similar to everything else, right? It's identifying what is it that you can get out of it, right? What
yeah,
is it good at? And then, you put shit in, they'll put shit out. But if you put some good
yeah.
information in, I'll give you some good stuff out.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, Eugene, what are you looking forward to working on in the next 5 years? What do you think kind of directions you want to take your studio in? I mean, obviously you've got like kind of you're developing, it seems like some like new idioms for wellness and health.
I mean, I think that the seeing how the different kind of flavors of wellness take shape is really interesting to us, and
Mhm.
how does that permeate through other programs, right? Like how does and we're starting to see it just a little bit on some of the residential projects, right? How does this typology, sort of infects, for lack of a better word, other programs? I mean, I'm super excited to see the working on new buildings within such an iconic fabric that is New York, and seeing what we can contribute. Right, it is really satisfying to be able to contribute something good. It's also terrifying too, right? You have to want to make sure you don't screw it up. But from a point of view of efficiency and energy use, and like what is it that we can do, right? And how do we get the answers that we're looking for in a smart and efficient way?
That's great. Well, really excited to see your projects. I'm looking forward to visiting the bathhouse.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to go. I actually stayed at a hotel right around the corner the other day. Ate at a great restaurant called Laser Wolf up on the roof.
Yep.
And so and that's my old neighborhood. I mean, that's it's great. Anyway, really looking forward to seeing what's coming out of Colberg Studio coming up.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
everyone,
Me
please,
too.
yeah, everyone, please check out Colberg Architecture. It's COLBERG, colbergarchitecture.com. And I've really had such a pleasure talking to you, Eugene. Thank you so much for your time today.
Same here.
I'll let you get back to work. I know you're super busy over there.
I know.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time. And everyone, once again, this is Practice Forward Podcast with Eugene Colberg. I'm Owen Bush, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much, Eugene.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
All right, bye.